In our previous video, we saw how we can enter data into an autocomplete and we can get the object under the covers that autocomplete text is representing. In other words, we can get an actual object of a class, not just the string that the user sees. That's really important because once we have that object, we can invoke methods on that object. But we have to consider something else. What if the user types something that is not even an object in the autocomplete? An autocomplete will allow you to start typing Eastern, Redbud, and it will automatically complete based on essentially a bank of answers that it has, that it matches to what you're typing in. But I could type something that's not in that predefined bank of answers. I might just make up a plant. I might say Eastern red pine. There's no such thing as an Eastern red pine. There's a white pine, but not a red pine. Now I tab off of this, and I've kind of been a bit misleading because it might still remember the plant GUID, or the unique ID, from the previous plant that I did select, and now I'm on a plant that doesn't even exist. So how do we handle this scenario? It's a little tricky, but it's certainly doable with just a little bit of programming knowledge. First of all, we have to understand what text is in this autocomplete text. So in my onItemClick that I created previously, I'm going to store the text that we see in the autocomplete into a variable. So I'll say ACT plant name dot get text dot toString, and then I'll Control Alt F, save this in a field because I'm going to need it in several different methods. So save it in GPS of plant, and we're going to call this plant string. Something like so. And I'll also say known plant equals true. So that means that we found a match. So known plant equals true, Alt Enter, and we'll say create field known plant in GPS of plant, and there we go, that looks good. Okay, let's do the same logic as soon as I correct the typo. Let's do the same logic down here in onItemSelected. So Control C and Control V, and now we're registering the plant name. Now, one thing that you'll notice is that I cannot click when I enter a new plant that doesn't exist, because the only way I can click is if what I'm typing matches something in the word bank, and then I click and there we go. But if I type something that doesn't exist, like Eastern red pine, the only way I can exit this field is by tabbing away, which is essentially a focus change. And that's why we have this focus change listener up here. So in the focus change listener, this is where things get just a little bit tricky. I'm going to say ACT plant name, and then I'm going to say get text dot toString, and we'll save this one into current plant name. So Control Alt V, local variables fine, and we'll say current plant name. Now after this, I'm going to say if current plant name is empty, but we actually want to negate that. We want to do like an is not empty. So if current plant name is not empty and current plant name dot equals, and what was the one that we called before when we had a correct plant name? It was called plant string. If it equals plant string. So in other words, what the user typed before hitting tab, is it actually, I'm sorry, I want to negate this. Is it not the same as the known plant that was selected before the user entered and hit tab? That's really hard to explain. Let me show it through example. So right now, let's say I have Eastern Redbud. Okay, and I click and I tab away. Eastern Redbud is now in plant string, and this is a known plant because I started typing and I selected it from the list of known plants. Now let's say I go back up here and edit, and I change it from Cercis canadensis Eastern Redbud to Eastern red pine, and now I tab off. Now at this point, when I tab away, current plant name is Eastern red pine. Plant string is the Eastern Redbud that I had selected before. So what I'm doing here is I'm saying, has the text in that autocomplete text view changed since the last time I had a known plant in that autocomplete text view? It's a little tricky to read this because I'm doing some negation. So I'm saying current plant name is not empty, and current plant name does not equal the previous plant name. And to make it even more confusing, I'm using the double ampersand. Remember, with double ampersand, both sides have to evaluate to true. So that requires a lot of kind of recursive mental logic. Frankly, it took me a good long time to figure this one out on my own. So if we're here, what I'm going to do is say we are in a new undefined plant. What I would typically do is navigate to a screen where the user can enter a new plant. And indeed, this is how it works on the Live Plant Places app. I found many times I was in a botanical garden, usually in a country that I don't live in. So maybe in Europe, a lot of times in Europe, maybe in South America, I was in a lot of botanical gardens there. And there were plants there that I had never seen before. But I wasn't online to the internet either. I needed a way to enter this plant information while I was offline and be able to synchronize it later. So that's how the Real Plant Places works. But to set up a whole new plant screen would be a whole couple more hours of video, which we don't need to get into right now. So what I'm going to do is just make a toast, make text, GPS of plant dot this, and then we'll say new plant, and then toast .length long .show. So we'll just simulate this with a toast. But one other thing that's very important that I have to do, because this is a new plant, I have to change the plant GUID back to 0. I don't want to keep using, or reusing in this case, a unique identifier for another plant. That would be very dangerous. Also, I'll say known plant equals false, just so I know that this is not a known plant. So I'll snap a breakpoint on this, and I'll save. And I'll throw it in the debugger, and let's try a few different scenarios. So the emulator's up. Let's go ahead and click into our plant name, and you see onFocus change hits immediately before I've even done anything, just because I've entered focus. We're not very worried about what happens here because we haven't even collected any data yet. So now I start typing Eastern Redbud, and I click on Eastern Redbud, and let's see what the debugger does. We get our plant object. We get the GUID of should be 83, sure enough it is. We get the string. The string is what the user sees, which is Cercis canadensis Eastern Redbud, and we say known plant is true, and then we continue. Now let's go back up and let's do our made up plant. I'm going to say Eastern Red Pine, and then I'm going to tab off, which is going to cause this to lose focus. When I tab off, the onFocus change fires. Let's remember what our variables are. Plant string is the last known plant that came from the selection where the user picked from the predefined word bank, the AutoComplete in other words. So that is Cercis canadensis. Current plant name is whatever the user has currently entered in there. If I mouse over that, current plant name should come to Eastern Red Pine. Now, is current plant name not empty? Current plant name is not empty because it's Eastern Red Pine, so this evaluates to true. Is current plant name not the same as plant string, in other words, the previous plant name? Current plant name is not the same, so this evaluates to true as well. Because both sides of the double ampersand evaluate to true, the entire if test evaluates to true, and we step in the if test, we show a toast, we reset the plant GUID, and we say known plant equals false, and we continue. So, that alone should give us a little idea. If you want to see more, keep watching. If not, then I hope you enjoyed the video. But let me go back now, and let's go ahead and say Eastern Cercis canadensis Eastern Redbud. And we've seen this part before. Okay. Now, let's say I click around. I click back. You see this time, current plant name is Eastern Redbud, and so is plant string. So it said, okay, well, the user clicked and then the field lost focus, but I know that this is still a known plant because the plant name has not changed. So we see that this if test will work just fine if I keep clicking around and the plant name doesn't change. If I click in, focus changes again. Okay. If I click out, focus changes again, and let's see. Current plant name should still be Eastern Redbud. Plant string should still be Eastern Redbud. So this last part of the test will evaluate to false, which means the entire test is skipped. And F9. I can keep going through different scenarios, and if you're implementing this on your own, I encourage you to try some different scenarios as well, because for me, there was a little bit more to this. but I had to really kind of think through it a lot before I was sure that I had the model down correctly that I wanted. I tested it out thoroughly and finally got it to work how I want. So, little trickiness dealing with the string that the user sees, but we have to remember that this word bank is populated from a series of DTOs that are known, where if the user types in something, populated from DTOs, and more specifically, what we're seeing is the result of the toString method on that DTO. Where on the other hand, if the user's just typing freehand, Eastern Red Pine, that is a string. It's not a DTO yet, it is a string. So in that case, we have to go back behind the scenes here and do a bit of string logic. So, I hope this video has been helpful. I look forward to reading your comments. Thank you.